This is not the TV anymore. We're really, really here. People are really dead in front of me.
What was the first moment of shock when you walked in?
No, I remember there was this girl that came in. She was only I think 2 years older, and she was having seizures. I was just in the back of the ambulance, and I was just saying, if I die here, on the day of judgment, let it be resurrected that I died helping this child, In my head, I want to call my mum and ask her to forgive me, but I just don't have the time. I have to help this child.
What happened to the girl? The Palestinian people have been dehumanized.
Yeah.
So explain to me some of that, what you saw.
We would see children coming in and, a lot of them, they would have the bread in their hand. They'd be eating. You'd kill them when they were eating, these children.
So dogs are feasting on humans.
Yes.
And the humans are eating what the animals would eat.
The most well-fed people in Gaza are the dogs.
But what moment haunts you or sticks with you till now?
I felt so guilty. It really haunts me every day.
Assalamu alaikum. Due to the nature of this discussion, we've decided to not include any advertisements in this podcast. In truth, we felt that it would be highly insensitive and inappropriate to do so. For that reason, I have just one request from you. That is to help boost this video on the YouTube algorithm by engaging with it. And you can engage with it through liking, subscribing, commenting, or sharing. In fact, I'd urge you to do all four. It's the least that we can do in support of our brothers and sisters in Gaza, who we have in many ways failed. May Allah Azza wa Jal forgive us and aid our brothers and sisters, put an end to their suffering. So please, help boost this video by engaging. With that said, let's get into the discussion. It's going to be a tough one, but inshallah, it's one that's important. Let's go. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Righteous and Rich podcast. Today I have Dr. Mohammed Mustafa with me. How are you doing, Sheikh? You okay?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Wa alaikum salam.
Barakallah feek. So, Doctor, you've been on a bit of a hopscotch around the globe.
Yep.
Raising awareness about your experience in Gaza.
Yep.
As a doctor.
Yeah.
And also just rallying a kind of traction towards this children's hospital that you're working on building in Gaza.
Yeah.
I want to discuss the whole journey.
Yeah.
Talk about your experience in Gaza and also what you're doing, because I actually believe, at least from what I've seen, that story hasn't had as much light on it as it should.
Yeah.
Because we've done a lot of crying.
Yeah.
We've shed a lot of tears over what's happening.
Yeah.
And one thing that people just want to know is, what can we do to help?
Yeah.
And there isn't actually much. There aren't really many options, but you're actually creating a very viable opportunity for us to actually do something. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that story and that journey, it needs to be unwrapped.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, just a bit about your background.
Yeah.
So you are originally from Gaza.
Yeah, so I was actually born a Palestinian refugee. I was actually born in Mecca.
Oh, wow.
And at 4 years old, we went from Mecca to the UK.
Okay.
And that's where I grew up. I grew up in the UK. I moved around a lot, but I grew up in Middlesbrough. And then I went to medical school in Liverpool. I worked in Glasgow for a couple of years.
Okay.
And then I moved over to Australia about 8 years ago.
Okay.
So, my father was born in Gaza. He's a Palestinian refugee. My mother was born in Jordan, another Palestinian refugee. She was displaced from Palestine in the 1960s before she was born. And she was born and raised in Jordan. So, I've lived the life of a displaced Palestinian my whole life. And so have my parents.
Very impressed though by how you described your father. When we were just on the taxi here, you mentioned he's a leading fertility specialist in the world.
Yeah.
But being a refugee who you mentioned would wear bags for trousers up until the age of 15.
Yeah.
How did he go from that to becoming a leading fertility specialist in the world?
My dad, he's like my hero. He, when kids would get their pocket money, they would buy sweets or they would put it together and buy a football. My dad would buy candles to read books and study at night because there was no electricity in the house. This was at 10 years old. He used to go out into the fields and pick fruits, and then at the end of the month of this hard labor, he would give the money to his mother to buy clothes. You know, I look at that and I look at the discipline that he had as a child, because he knew what he wanted and he wanted a better life for me. Even though, you know, he never even met my mother yet. You know, he's just a kid, but he's already planning my life and making my life better. And, you know, when he got his A-level results, you know, just after he finished college to go into university, he was in Cairo. He got like the highest mark in Cairo, second highest mark in all of Egypt, a refugee kid, right? And a rich family bought his results because of the corruption. They gave it to their son. They bought my dad's results. And my granddad, Allah yarhamu, he had to go, he took the school hostage until they gave my dad back his results.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So even if he did everything that he could in his power, you know, my dad's not like my granddad. My granddad was a tough man.
Okay.
You know, my dad's a much softer man.
Okay.
And, you know, he did everything right. My dad, he studied since he was a kid. He did all of that, but it was still taken away from him because he was a Palestinian refugee. And, you know, it was through the toughness of my granddad that he got his results back. And then he, you know, became a doctor. And when we moved to the UK, you know, he moved from one job to another, and he actually wanted to be a vascular surgeon.
Okay.
But, you know, no one would give
vascular,
him...
that's the heart? Sorry,
vascular is like your blood work system.
Okay.
You know, so he wanted to be a vascular surgeon, and the opportunity wasn't given to him. And he ended up working in Middlesbrough under this doctor called Mr. Taylor. And he saw my dad and he was like, this guy is so smart and intelligent. This is not the specialty my dad wants, but he was just doing some cover work in that area. And Mr. Taylor was like, this guy's better than the registrars I have.
Oh, wow.
Who is this guy? You know what I mean? And then what ended up happening was he said to my dad, look, if you stay here, I'll train you. And, you know, you can climb up the ladder here as an, you know, obs and gynae consultant. And my dad was like, you know, I've got no option here. I've been trying to, you know, do all this. Is probably what I've got to do for my kids. And then he went from being, you know, this obs and gynae registrar to then becoming a partner and subspecializing in fertility medicine to now being one of the leading fertility specialists in the UK and in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Allahumma barik.
Yes.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
So as a Palestinian,
yeah,
who's grown up as a refugee,
yeah,
and seen your parents and your grandparents basically having been ethnically cleansed out of Gaza.
Yeah.
What has been the Palestinian story that you've been raised with? Like, what's your attachment to this cause?
Do you know, when you have to go shopping late at night, you know, when you go to Tesco's to look for reduced items to eat because you're sending money back home so your family can eat as well. When you don't see your father growing up because he has to do all these extra work and shifts to look and support his parents and his brothers and sisters who are living as refugees. When you have to watch how dehumanized Palestinians are talked about on the TV screens. When you have to watch your family be killed in Gaza. This is what you grow up with. And it shapes how the way that you see the world, and it shapes the way that you see yourself.
How do you see the world?
I'm very pragmatic about how I look at the world. The world is like human beings. It's self-serving. Whatever is best for it, it'll do. And, you know, for a long time, reducing the Palestinian issue has been the thing that the world wants to do, but I don't think that's the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see yourself?
I see myself as a representative of Palestine and Palestinian people. You know, I grew up with in this world where I didn't really know what my identity was. You know, I knew I was Palestinian, but I'd never been home. I can speak fluent Arabic, but I don't have amazing vocabulary, and, you know, mkassar, they would say, like, it's a bit broken up here and there. I don't know all of our traditions. You know, I grew up in the West, but I'm a practicing Muslim who prays 5 times a day, fasts, gives zakat, do all that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, I'd look at it and I'd say, what am I? You know, I'm too English to be Palestinian, and I'm too Palestinian to be English. Mm-hmm. And I would always want to represent where I'm from, because I felt like those people in Palestine never had a voice, and I was their voice in the West. So that's that's how I viewed myself. I viewed myself as being a representative, and I always tried to hold myself to a standard that I was not just that, but like, my name is Muhammad. It's the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That always had a burden on me as well. That like, whatever you do, your name is Muhammad. I was born in Mecca, right? I'm from the holy land of Jerusalem. I always just felt this connection. Do you know what I mean? That there was this burden placed on me. And look, I'm not a perfect person. None of us are. But I'm trying. I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I'm trying the best that I can to be a good human being. And I want people to see the humanity of what it is to be not just a Palestinian but a Muslim.
The thing that just very is just really striking, subhanAllah, is that you've, as people are going to see when they hear this conversation, you've been to Gaza, you've seen all the massacre, the bloodshed, you've grown up and you've inherited this struggle through generations. But you don't come across like butthurt. You don't come across vengeful. You have the right to be.
Yeah.
Why is that? You said family members have been killed. Parents.
I've had a lot of family members not just killed, tortured. I'd rather they had been killed than tortured the way that they've been tortured. Family members growing up in poverty because of where they're from. Family members had their whole livelihoods taken away from them. Pain and hurt and anger, it's so consuming. It consumes the soul. And I want to be productive, and you can't be productive in that state. If you're on fire inside, everything you touch will burn. You have to take a step back. And I've just, it's not that I've always been this way. I have been angry before. I've been frustrated. I've lashed out, but it's not done anything. And when you go to Gaza, right, as I worked there during the war, and children are dying in your arms, bleeding to death while you hold them, mothers falling on their knees and screaming, and the whole department is just full of children's bodies in the most mutilated ways. Heads missing, brain matter out, intestines hanging out, limbs missing, 60 to 80% body burn, still alive, screaming in pain. You can't be, anger is not what's going to save these children's lives. So, I just said to myself, I have to become rational. If I need to save them, I need to do something that's different to save their lives, and that's what I've just been trying to do.
This is an example of our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That despite all of the torture, all of the bloodshed, all of the oppression, like he had a very level head.
Yeah,
he'd even make decisions that sometimes his Sahaba, like at the Battle of Hudaybiyah, Treaty of Hudaybiyah, they couldn't necessarily they couldn't see the rationale behind it.
Yeah,
but then that balanced head thinking is what led them to ultimately conquer Mecca. And then there's that magnificent moment when the Prophet ﷺ, he walks in, and all these people that have tortured him and his companions for almost 2 decades now are at his mercy and worried for their life. And he says to them, "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm." There's no blame upon you today. And they will become, they practically will become Muslim because they see that wow, he didn't respond to our evil and our hatred with bloodshed. He could have, and he would have been justified to exact revenge. But the way he composed himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was very powerful. So talk to me about how because you've been to Gaza twice now.
During the war.
Talk to me about how that even came about.
My whole life when I was a kid, I always wanted to help. I always had that thing. I want to help Palestine. I want to help poor people. I've grown up poor. And I always used to watch my dad, and I saw what my dad was like, the changes that he was making. He was bringing life into this world as a fertility specialist. People who were, waiting 10, 12 years to have a kid. And then they came to my dad, and then, subhanAllah, with the permission of Allah, like, they have these kids. And you just see how their whole life changes and what my dad did for them, And I always looked at that inspiration, like I wanted to be that, but I wanted to be on the front line. You know, I didn't want to do gynecology, you know. It's not for me, but I wanted to be on the front line, and emergency medicine was the way to do it. And you know, I just felt that like this is my calling.
Okay.
You know, to help people, and the way to do that was through medicine.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to go down a medical route.
And you became, you know, you studied, you became a doctor, mashallah, tabarakallah. Yeah. How do you end up in Gaza?
So, subhanallah, I was at this position in my training where, like, I was, I'm not a consultant yet, but I'm pretty much able to do everything a consultant can do. And when the opportunity came about Gaza, people to go, there wasn't many people willing to put up their hands to go because it was so dangerous.
Okay.
You know, and
so there was actually a shortage.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's plenty of people that want to volunteer to go, but when push comes to shove, there's a lot of people that pull out, and that's a problem as well. And I just applied for months for somebody to accept me, to take me to go to Gaza. And eventually I got accepted. And then, I had to go through the UN, World Health Organization. Then you have to go through Israeli clearance, which is KOGAT. And once I got all of that clearance, I managed to get into Gaza. And subhanAllah, like, I just felt at home.
Really?
I felt as soon as we crossed into Gaza, because like what happens is when you arrive through the UN bus at the border crossing, right?
Which border is this?
Karam Shalom crossing to go into Gaza.
Okay.
Right. So when the UN convoy arrives, it's after you've done all your security checks.
So this is in Israel?
Yeah, in Israel now. So now we're in Israel. And as we're about to enter into Gaza, we go through another set of security and clearances. Once we've done that, we have our bags. We don't drive into Gaza. We have to carry our bags into Gaza, walk about 100 meters, 200 meters, and then there'll be a car or a bus waiting to take us into Gaza. And I remember the first steps that I took, holding my bags and just looking around. And, we had to walk through like Israeli military. So I was walking through these mega tanks and Israeli soldiers while I was holding our bags. And, we were told not to make eye contact with any of the soldiers, not to stop for any reason, just to keep walking straight. And I remember just walking in and just thinking to myself, I'm home.
SubhanAllah.
Even despite all of this, I'm home. And yeah, man, it was really emotional for me, like as I was walking in there, because like you see these tanks and these soldiers, and you know what these tanks and soldiers have done to the people of Gaza, and I'm walking in amongst them. But I remember thinking to myself that like, even with all the rubble that you could see everywhere and all the destruction, this is what it is to be Palestinian. You live between hope and despair at what I was seeing, but hope that I finally came home. I was home after all these years. I was never allowed in as a refugee, but because now I have a British passport and an Australian passport, now I can go.
SubhanAllah.
And, there I was, and I was like, I'm here to help my people. I'm here to help the Ummah, in my capacity as a doctor. And it was that hope and despair of what was going on, and hope that after all of these years, decades, there I was finally coming home. And Allah chose the time for me to come home, which was then. That was the time to come home, was when they needed me the most.
Wow. Why were you told to not make eye contact with the soldiers?
Just like their security. I mean, part of it is just like they try to intimidate, and they don't make you feel welcome, that you're coming in to help. I don't really know the real reason. Maybe it's just a security thing, not to look at eye contact with them. And if we dropped anything, not to stop as we were walking to the cars. And yeah, I mean, there's, that journey, the second time that I went there, the drive from Jordan into Gaza is 3 hours total. But with the security checks and the waiting and all that kind of stuff, it took us 18 hours to get to Gaza.
Okay.
We were fasting as well that day. So it was a tough day.
Is it just in Ramadan?
Yeah, in Ramadan, yeah. That's where I went.
What was the first moment of shock when you walked in and you were like...
The first time or the second time?
Let's do both.
So the first time that I went in, I remember when we arrived at the hospital and ambulances were arriving and they just brought in body bags. Everyone that they went was all dead. It was an entire family. I think it was like 12 people, women and children. and some men as well. And it was just a family. And, you know, we went to the morgue as we were bringing in the body bags, and they were opening up the plastic bags for them to be identified. Other family members were there trying to identify the bodies. And I remember just like when they opened up these plastic bags and they were just covered in blood and, you know, burnt bodies and people, you know, hugging these burnt bodies and screaming and crying. And it just hit me. I was like, we are in Gaza. And you could hear the drones overhead and the bombings going off. And I was like, yep, this is not the TV anymore. We're really, really here. People are really dead in front of me. Screams are real. We're in a war zone right now. And that's when it really hit home that we were there. Like, that's it. We've arrived now in Gaza. Literally from the first 5 minutes we were there, we went to the morgue.
The second time?
The second time I arrived during the ceasefire, you know, and there was a bit more of a lively spirit with people. People were a bit more happy. You know, but the ceasefire I was there only lasted about 5 days, and then the war started again. But, you know, when I have the second time that I was there, just the destruction. It was like, you know, we drove around. It wasn't any standing buildings or any buildings that hadn't been damaged. So, yeah, it was just the shock at the scale. The scale.
In 9 months, approximately.
In 9 months, yeah, 9 months since the last time I went. Just the destruction. So, yeah, you know, these things, yeah.
You mentioned that the Palestinian people have been dehumanized.
Yeah.
So explain to me some of that, what you saw.
You know, it's when you see 20 children brought in dead, and it doesn't even make headline news. You know, when you're seeing children shot in the head and neck with snipers and drones, targeted. Single shots, not a spray fire and a stray bullet. Single precise shots to the head and neck. How do you do that as a grown man? How do you shoot a child in the head? How do you shoot a child in the head when the mother's carrying that child? To aim just for the child that's being carried by the mother. What's happened to you as a human being to view this child in such a, you know, in such a, to not even have any value of this child? That's what happens when you go in there. When you see, you know, we would see children coming in, and, you know, a lot of them, they would have the bread in their hand. They'd be eating. You'd kill them when they were eating, these children. Yeah, and you know, you look around, and it's hard. It's hard to see it, because, you know, the thing is, you know why it affected me more? Because those children look like me. You know, when I went into Gaza, most people didn't believe I was an international doctor, because they were like, you look like us. The Shekla Ghazawi, they would all say, you look Ghazawi.
SubhanAllah.
You know what I mean? And you know, when you see a child and they look like you, your eyes, your nose, your ears, yeah, and it hits you differently. So, yeah, you know, like, but, you know, I've lived that, you know, my whole life. I've been, you know, I was bullied at school back in the day. I had trouble, and, you know, I know what it's like to be valued less. I've been valued less my whole life. Even as a doctor, I've been valued less compared to other doctors. As, you know, when I was playing professional sports, I was always valued less. And, like, that's just something that I've learned to live with, that I'll never get an equal footing like other people. But, you know, my concern is Allah, not them.
This claim has been made for many years, that the IDF targets civilians, specifically children.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there's a very precise shot taken to the head of a kid from a sniper.
Yeah.
What is it about that, contextually speaking, that leads you to believe that that's not an accident?
The frequency in which it happens. You know, I was there during the ceasefire, and I posted on my Instagram 2 separate children that were shot. One was shot in the head, one was shot in the neck.
During the ceasefire?
During the ceasefire. Who does that? Who does that? In the West Bank, how many kids, how many videos do you need to see of children being shot by snipers in their hearts and in their heads? You know, before October the 7th, 2023, the West Bank was the deadliest year for children since the Intifada. I think it was about 90 children that had been killed.
Before October 7th?
Before October the 7th. It was the deadliest year for children in the West Bank since the Second Intifada.
You see, people really need to understand, like, snipers are trained
Yep.
to not miss, to take into account the direction of the wind. They do all these calculations before they take the shot.
It's not one, it's two, because you need the guy next to you that measures the wind for you and, targeting for you. So it's a two-man thing, having a sniper. So it's two people talking to each other about this target.
Yeah.
It's not one crazed man.
Yeah.
It's two people, and that's why it's just so barbaric. Just that
And a
act
shot
alone.
to the heart and a shot to the head.
Yeah.
That's the kill.
That's to kill.
There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's not even to kill. Sometimes it's to maim. When they had the protest, I think it was in 2018, the March for Return in Gaza, where people were doing a peaceful protest.
Uh-huh.
And, there was about 200 or 300 people killed by snipers this was a peaceful protest in Gaza where they were marching on the border of Gaza to protest the right to return. And snipers were aiming for people's kneecaps with specialized bullets that caused so much damage on the exit that a lot of people had amputations from that there.
What's the difference between your humanity and the humanity of that sniper? Where you're looking at this child who's just been shot in the head with bread in his hand, and you're crying tears over that. And that IDF soldier on the other side who's actually sitting there with his partner calculating, I'm going to hit this 2-year-old kid that's being carried by his mum in the head. Right? Like, what's the difference between your humanity and his that results in these different perspectives and actions?
It's not the child that doesn't have the humanity. It's the person who shot them, right? No matter how evil they treat these people, right? Yeah, and the cruel conditions that you see. It's not.
I mean, the difference between you, as a doctor, your humanity and.
Well, this is the thing. I think the only difference between my humanity and their humanity is just the way that we've grown up, our understanding of the world, our perspective. I look at this life and I see it as precious. And I look at this life and I think to myself, like, look, even if I don't like this person, even if this person has committed crimes and this, that, and the other, in the eyes of Allah, they're precious. That's first and foremost. In the eyes of their family, they're precious. Mm-hmm. To themselves, they're precious. It's not my right to give and take life away from someone. It's not my right to take someone's life. So, I think the difference is just understanding where we are in the world. It's just where I see myself in the world and where they see themselves in the world. I don't see myself as a position of authority to take life from anybody. Maybe they see themselves as a position of authority to take life. And then when they're like that, they have to justify by dehumanizing this person that they're going to take the life of. But, I don't care whether it's a Muslim life or a non-Muslim life or whatever. Every life is precious. And, there's very strict rules about killing and death and justice and things like that in Islam. And I do not want to be the person that has to carry that responsibility of deciding who gets to live and die. But what I'll do is I'll do my best to help people live as a doctor.
What's the situation of the healthcare system in Gaza?
There's nothing there. There really is nothing there. I mean, there's some partial buildings that are standing, but the first time that I was there, like, we were just using the same suture equipment to suture people. We were using that over and over again. I would just carry it in my pocket.
And what is that, sorry?
The suture equipment to, like, sew people up with.
Ah, okay.
I would just carry that in my pocket. It'd be the same thing that I would use over and over again.
Is it like stitching?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, things like, there's no sterile conditions whatsoever. Half the time we're operating on people on the floor. The beds that are there are just the mattresses of the beds have gone. So it's just a metal frame.
What's happened to the mattresses?
Well, people are living out on the street, so people are taking these mattresses because they need them to go sleep. You know what I mean? And people have got injuries, so people take the mattresses because they've got these massive burns and injuries. They can't sleep on the tarmac.
Yeah.
But then these beds are just like metal frames. People are just lying down on metal frames with a child is just lying down on a metal frame with a leg missing. Do you know what I mean? Not even a comfortable bed to lay on as they're bleeding out to death. There's no ventilators. You know, I remember like there was this girl that came in. She was only like, I think 2 years older, and she was having seizures. And the seizure that she had was going on for 45 minutes. And because of the lack of medicine as well, we didn't even have the right anti-epileptic medication to stop the seizure. So we were giving her things like midazolam, which is a benzodiazepine, which is one of those drugs that calms you down. But it calms you down to a point of where like it can swish the brain to calm down and stop the seizure. But we were giving her multiple doses of that and it wasn't working. We were giving her the only anti-epileptic medication we had, which was phenytoin. That's all we had. We didn't, you know, there's like 20 different other medications that you can give and they all work for different types of seizures. But obviously her type of seizure, phenytoin, was just not working and the midaz wasn't working. Now, when somebody's having a seizure and they're contracting a lot, their muscles are contracting, if they're doing that repeated contraction for 45 minutes, then they can stop breathing because they're just contracting. They're not using their respiratory muscles to breathe. So the way to do that, the way to stop this, if you're getting what we call status epilepticus, is to put them in a medically induced coma. And the problem is we didn't have a ventilator. So if we were going to put her in a medically induced coma, there was nothing to blow air into her except, you know, a balloon, someone squeezing a balloon of air into her. So, you know, we had to make the decision because it was 45 minutes in and we were putting oxygen on her, but the oxygen that we were giving her wasn't enough to get her oxygen levels up. Her oxygen levels were sitting at 85%. And then
while she's in a coma?
While she's having these seizures. And we were like, we need to get her intubated and ventilated. So they were like, there's a children's hospital. The only children's hospital in the north is, you know, 3-4 kilometers away. And they've got ventilators for children there. When we called them, they were like, all our ventilators are being used. And I was like, but I can't leave her here. So, you know, in the end, we called one of the ambulances to come and I got in the back of an ambulance and transported her to that hospital, holding her while bagging and masking her, blowing air into her lungs, trying to keep the oxygen levels at a sustainable level so she doesn't get a hypoxic brain injury because I don't want her brain to be starved of oxygen and then she's got lifelong brain injury. So I'm doing this in the back of an ambulance. And obviously at the same time, like we haven't coordinated this with the UN. You know, there's drones overhead. I could get killed.
And they attack ambulances?
Yeah, they do, yeah. So, I mean, when I was there, they killed those 15 paramedics and they buried them with their ambulances. But,
the ones that were executed?
Yeah, the ones that were executed. I was there when that happened. But, you know, I was just in the back of the ambulance and I was just like saying, you know, if I die here, then, you know, on the day of judgment, let it be resurrected that I died helping this child, you know? So, you know, because it's difficult when you have to make decisions like that because obviously, in my head, I want to call my mum and ask her to forgive me, but I just don't have the time. I have to help this child. So, yeah, man, it was, it depends how you go to Gaza, what your intention is, because obviously some doctors are not going to leave, you know, the hospital compounds because it's dangerous. And then there are other doctors that will risk a lot to help. And, you know, that's why when I was going into Gaza, I knew the sacrifices that I was willing to make. So I knew that there was a real risk that I could die. But, you know, people of Gaza have paid such a high price. You know, my blood is not more important than theirs. So, yeah, you know.
What happened to the girl?
So I got her to the hospital and I stayed in touch with her father and then I called him up the next day to ask what had happened. And he said to me that, said she's back home playing. Yeah, so, you don't have to, it makes it worth it, you know?
Yeah. What are some of the difficult decisions you had to make? You know, when you're with the healthcare system that's practically non-existent.
Yeah.
And you've got people that are coming with, you know, equally like traumatic injuries.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a choice?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first full day I was there, the first time that I went. And, you know, we had a mass casualty event and we had, essentially it was children. They were being playing and a missile hit and there was like 12 kids that had come in.
Okay.
I remember opening up the first blanket and it was a child with like its head missing and just brain matter everywhere. And I remember just like panicking and just freezing in shock at what I was seeing, you know, because I was like, it's real now. You know, when you can smell the burnt flesh and you see a child with his skull, you know, most of his head was missing, but there was a bit of it left and his whole brain was just hanging out. And I remember just freezing. for like 15, 20 seconds at the shock at what I was seeing. And then one of the nurses just, was shaking my shoulder, and she was like, "Ya doctor, we need you. محتاجينك, like, we need you. Then I got up, and then, we started to pick up, I picked up this one kid, I put him on the bed, and he had like this massive open wound on his back, and he was covered in blood.
Was he alive?
He was alive. But then there was another kid that was on the floor that had a severe abdominal injury.
Okay.
And you could see that he was struggling to breathe, and he was struggling a lot. And, one of the student nurses, subhanAllah, like, I remember this, and it really, really struck me. She just came and she sat on the floor next to this kid. Remember, there's bodies everywhere. She just sat next to this kid. She put his head on her lap. She started stroking his head until he died. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, she's a student nurse, but she knew he was going to die, and I knew he was going to die. And I focused my effort on that child, and I left him on the floor, and he died, that kid. And she was just there stroking his head, like she knew what to do. And I remember this kid, because when this mass casualty event comes in, the families all rush into the, and there's people screaming, "Oh, Ibni and my son, and see this," and people are shouting and screaming. They're angry at what's happened, what's going on. And this child, I was remember thinking to myself, like, where are his family, where are his parents? They don't, they might not even know. Like, people might have just seen this on the thing and just grabbed him and taken him to...
They might even be dead.
And this kid is like, taking his last breaths, and all he's seeing around him is people screaming and shouting and other children around him with their heads missing. Like, think about the fear that child has before he dies. And... yeah, like, things like that really stick with you. And, there are a lot of doctors that have seen things, but maybe they don't analyze things the way that I analyze them, because I look at things at a very deeper level.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I've always been analytical like that, but it's just noticing things, noticing the little things, right? Yeah. Noticing how the student nurse just knew her place. She knew what to do. But then looking at that child and seeing what he must have seen in his last moments as he was taking his last breaths. And, that's just one incident and one child. There are tens of thousands of children that have been killed. What are their experiences of their last moments of life? Whether it was those that were stuck under the rubble and were suffocated to death. I remember when... Sorry, man. I remember when we had like a mass casualty event, and,
Can we get tissue?
Yeah, I remember when we had like a mass casualty event, and like the paramedics would say it was a house and there was 100 people in the house. And I was like, well, we've only got like 15 bodies here, like 15 people. And the others were just trapped in the house. And, they would come back and forth, and I'd ask the paramedic, and I'd say, what's happened? Have we managed to get more of them? And then, he simply just said to me, he said, the screams have stopped. Screams have stopped. And I said to him, what does that mean? And he says, it means that we stop. That's the lack of resources. So there's thousands of people buried under the rubble in Gaza. Thousands. And, sometimes those people, because I remember seeing like a story of they pulled out this kid who had been under the rubble for 6 days, hadn't drank water or anything like that. When they pulled him out, he was still alive. But he was so thin and subhanAllah, I was thinking, like, if he's still alive after 6 days, imagine all those other children that may have spent 10 days alive under the rubble, dying slowly.
They just lost the strength to scream.
And they're getting slowly crushed to death, their organs, dying in the most brutal, horrific way. That's what's happening. This is not hyperbole. This is true. There are children that are dying under the rubble, and they're dying. It's taking them days to die, and they die a slow, painful, and they might be dying, and they could see their father's charred body right next to them. There's a girl that I treated. Her name is Janine, and she was asleep in her house, and she was sleeping in her father's arms and next to her with her sister. When the missile hit, it killed 26 members of her family, including her father, and her sister, who was next to her, was cut in two when they found them, when they dug them out. Found her sister cut in two, and Janine had this severe head injury.
How old was she?
She was like 4 years old, maybe. She had a severe head injury. And, she was slipping in and out of consciousness. And she had a leg break as well. And I remember just going and visiting her in the tents, and she was in and out of consciousness for days. I still stay in touch with her family. And she still hasn't been able to talk. She still can't talk. Maybe because it's the brain injury. Maybe it's the trauma. But what saved her was she was asleep in her father's arms. Her other sister, who wasn't asleep in her father's arms, she was cut in two. Her father died, his body protecting her. And, she's still got a severe head injury from it. But just, I look at her and I'm just going, what kind of life? 26 of her family are dead. Sister cut in half in front of her. Her father died holding her. And it's just, the tragedies, the tragic stories are just never ending.
Someone who's listening to this will probably pick up that you keep referencing what's happening to children. So, were you in a pediatric hospital or something?
No, it's just, we were seeing a lot of children. I was in a public hospital, so we were seeing everyone, but it was just, half the population of Gaza is children. And it just felt like half the time that it was just children being targeted, the amount of kids that we would see come in.
What could be the strategy there? Why would they be targeting children? Like this, as in, you can't even mistake a 2-3-year-old for a Hamas fighter.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even a mistake you can make. You can't mistake a 5-year-old for a terrorist.
It's pain. It's to inflict pain. It's to inflict pain on the population. It's to make them suffer by making their children suffer.
But why would they want to make them suffer if they have an issue with terrorists?
Because
what's the population got to do with it?
Because it's never been about Hamas. It's never been about the hostages. It's never been about any of that. Like I say, they killed 80 children in the West Bank where there's no Hamas before October the 7th. So it's never been about, it's never been about, and look, who funded Hamas?
They did.
They did,
yeah, of course.
They did it as a controlled opposition.
Yeah.
And right now, they've just admitted that they've been funding and arming ISIS fighters in Gaza as a counterbalance. It's just come out in the news. Former security advisor Israel has just said that Netanyahu's just admitted. Yeah. So now they're looking at an even more extreme version to have, armed gangs now in Gaza.
Sorry, as in they are funding ISIS to fight Hamas, or
they're funding gangs that are ISIS affiliated in Gaza to loot the aid.
Now?
Yes, right now. To loot the aid, cause civil unrest, and also to fight Hamas.
And then what's going to happen when they turn on them?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, because it doesn't matter to them. What matters is that we don't have a Palestinian freedom or a Palestinian state. So you always fund the opposition. You always fund the thing that you can never make a deal with. And yeah, I mean, look, to the whole world, it looks like, and I don't know how they've managed to pull it off, but they're making Hamas look like a reasonable negotiating partner, and Israel being the unreasonable one. So in order to counter that balance now you start funding ISIS-affiliated gangs. You just take it more and more extreme, but this is only going to spiral and lead to more instability and more danger.
Yeah. But please tell me, and the viewers, some more of the horrors that you saw.
Like I say, like, when you would see, look, I'll tell you what, like, it's just how remarkable the Palestinian people are in Gaza, like what they're able to endure and keep going. When I was there the first time round, there was a lot of starvation, and there was a breakout of hepatitis, which is like a viral infection of the liver. And it happens because of dirty drinking water.
And what does that do to the body?
Well, it causes liver damage. Now, usually, if you are a normal person, it's like this viral illness of the liver. You get a bit of abdominal pain, a bit of nausea, a bit of vomiting. Sometimes you might even go a bit yellow, right? But you usually get better within 6 weeks. But when you're living in a high-stress environment like that, you're malnutritioned, and your body has already endured so much. We were seeing kids that had liver failure, full-on liver failure, and dying from liver failure, because what the liver does is the liver cleans out the blood, and one of the things it cleans out from the blood is like this compound called ammonium, and they can't get rid of it, and then that goes into the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it causes brain damage. And we were seeing kids that were coming in brain dead from liver failure, and then they would die soon after, because the ammonium in the blood is also makes the blood acidic. So their blood would go acidic, they would go brain dead, and then when the blood was so acidic, it would cause a heart attack, a massive heart attack, and they would die.
You mentioned that the first time you went, there were children that came in malnourished, that just died in front of you.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
The first time that I went there, we were seeing like starvation of children. I remember sometimes when kids come in and they were just sticks and bones, and the parents would bring them in, and the kids would be doing this agonal breathing where they just, and it's like this unrhythmic breathing, and that's kind of end of life breathing. And I remember just sometimes, like, we'd put them on a bed and we'd simply just cover them up, and I'd just tell the mother, just, yani, il waqt jay, the time's coming. Just hold their hand. That's all we can do. We can't feed them. We don't have the refeeding capabilities, because you can't give them a spoonful of food. It could kill them. Giving them food would kill the child, because they go into this thing called refeeding syndrome, where, there's a massive shift of electrolyte imbalance in the body.
Okay, and it shocks the system?
It shocks the system, and then it can cause a massive heart attack.
Oh, wow.
So you need to, so you don't get refeeding syndrome, you need to have very controlled way in which you refeed someone who's been starving to death. And that's why, right now, with all the starvation that we're seeing right now, so many more kids could die. Because if you would just give now a whole load of food to kids, some of them would die from the refeeding syndrome. So what you really need to do is these starving kids, they need an influx of doctors and nurses to refeed them properly, so they can put on the weight in a safe way. Especially the first, few days.
Just giving food is not gonna.
It's not gonna know. They need medical care while they're that cachexically thin.
What's going through your mind when you're telling that mum his time's coming, or her time's coming? Like,
despair, like guilty that I couldn't do more for them. I felt ashamed. I would begin to question myself as well. I'd go, I'm not a consultant, I'm just a trainee. Maybe if there was someone better than me, better trained doctor than me, maybe they could save this kid's life. I felt guilty. I felt like maybe someone could do better than me, but a lot of time there's nothing you could do. They would die within, a couple of hours when they would come in, that starvation. And that was in June last year.
So what are they eating if there's no food?
Leaves, grass. That's what people were eating, leaves and grass. Food for animal stock food, kind of stuff that they would put for chickens. That's what people are eating.
It's shocking that you say that to me, because subhanAllah, you mentioned in one of the videos that when you just came in, you saw dogs eating human body, human flesh, dead human corpses. Mm-hmm. So dogs are feasting on humans, and the humans are eating what the animals would eat. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. The irony. And, there's so many, the most well-fed people in Gaza are the dogs. From all the corpses. And because, once you've got like 100 people buried under the rubble, right? And you can't find them, who can find the body that's buried? The dogs smell. And they will burrow and dig, and they will get to the body that's down there, and they will pull off an arm or a leg. And you might see a dog running with an arm in its mouth.
You've seen this?
Yeah. And you know what? Despite all of that, you always see the kids of Gaza playing with cats, feeding cats. SubhanAllah, it was something I always, because that cats are a form of comfort for the kids, especially with all the bombs raining down. They just hold on to this little cat and they share their food with the cat. Look at their mercy that they have, where they can see an animal eat their own family, and yet there they are showing so much mercy to a cat and sharing their food with another animal. That's the mercy that these people in Gaza have.
You just said to me that the most well-fed creatures in Gaza are the dogs. That's That statement shook me, bro.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah. The dogs and the rats.
What moment? It might be hard to pick one because there's probably so many. But what moment haunts you or sticks with you till now?
There's a lot of moments that really, do you know, and maybe I said this on the one path, but I remember when like we had a mass casualty event and I was putting in a chest drain in this man, and this woman grabbed my ankle on the floor. She was literally under the bed. There's just so many bodies everywhere. And she was saying, Saidni. And I was like, right, let me just finish putting this chest tube in this guy and secure it, and then I'll see her. And as I finished putting in the chest tube in, I looked down and she died while holding my ankle. Right? So guilty. I felt so guilty. She died holding my ankle. What did help? Oh, like, it really haunts me every day. Do you know, sometimes I think to myself, that's someone's sister. It could be someone's mother. What do I say to that family? She asked for my help, but I just didn't help her. Yeah, man, there's a lot of, yeah. It's hard. It's hard.
How did she end up on the floor? Why was she on the floor?
There was just so many bodies everywhere. People were just bringing in bodies in these blankets and just putting them down everywhere. I didn't even see her. She was under the bed. There was that many bodies, that there were bodies under the bed. We had this mass casualty event.
When you say mass casualty, what does that mean?
Just lots of injured people coming in all at the same time. You know, more than 5 people. Well, the mass casualty is like more than 3 people, but yeah, we had like a mass casualty event. Like, there was literally hundreds of people brought in.
What were the hospitals that you were in?
Oh, I've worked in a lot of them. So I worked at the European Hospital. I worked at NASA Hospital. I worked at the Baptist Hospital. I worked at Al-Aqsa Hospital. So yeah, I've worked in quite a few of them.
Did they attack any of the hospitals that you were in?
Yeah. Yeah, they did. You know, a few days after I left the Baptist Hospital, they bombed the emergency department that I was working in. They bombed the grounds of the Al-Aqsa Hospital while we were there, while we were in it.
Oh, so you were in the hospital?
Yeah, when the grounds were bombed, yeah. So, yeah, man, it's not easy. Not easy being in that place.
So what happens when you're in the hospital and you hear the hospital grounds being bombed?
You know, it's scary. Like, even if the hospital grounds are being bombed, like, you know, there was, you know, I've got videos up of just like the hospital being bombed 50 meters outside the hospital grounds being bombed. And, you know, you know, when it shakes, look, man, I mean, there's a lot of times where I've been near where bombs have gone off, where missiles have hit.
Uh-huh.
And it's really, really scary. Like, you know, the whole room starts shaking, the roof tiles maybe fall in. And I remember once, like, when, you know, it was just outside the Al-Aqsa Hospital was bombed in Deir al-Balah. And I remember just, like, being shocked like this and, like, you know, thinking, oh my God, like, are we getting bombed? And this kid just grabbed me. This kid just grabbed my hand and he just said to me, like, he goes, "Tchafische, doctor." Which is, don't be scared, doctor. I was just thinking to myself, like, here I am, former professional rugby player, jiu-jitsu champion, you know, 6'2", 18 stone, big man. And I'm scared of this bombing going on around me. And this kid was just telling me, don't be scared, you're okay. إحنا هون, like we're here, it's okay, don't be scared. I just think
And he was a patient.
I don't know whether he was a patient or whether he's with someone that was injured, or I remember just thinking, subhanAllah, like he was concerned about my safety.
SubhanAllah.
He was concerned about how I felt, because he knew that I wasn't prepared. He knew that I'm just not from here.
Yeah.
That I'm not like them. I'm not used to this. Oh, wow.
Doctor, why are they bombing hospitals?
This
doesn't add up.
Well, they claim that it's used as a military base, but even let's say it was used as a military base, right? It's still illegal under international law to bomb it. But the idea is they want the land, so you have to take away everything that is compatible with life, and healthcare is one of those big things. If there's nowhere to be treated, and there's no sanitation, and there's no water, and there's no food to get in, you have to leave. And that's what they're trying to do.
Doctor, this claim of it being a Hamas military base and whatnot, it's been...
Do you know what? Look, every accusation is a confession.
Yeah.
Because do you remember the Turkish hospital that was blown up, the cancer hospital in
Correct.
Gaza?
It was the first one that they attacked, if I'm mistaken.
And this was when I was there. They blew up the... so they just blew that up like a month ago, right?
Okay.
They blew it up in a controlled demolition. Do you know what that cancer hospital, that Turkish cancer hospital, you know what that was being used as a year for?
For?
An Israeli military base in Gaza. They use that as their military base in Gaza, in the center of Gaza, for a whole year. So when they talk about Hamas using hospitals as a military base,
they've been using it.
They've been using that as a military base. The El Shifa hospital, Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, I think that's what was his name. He said we built the underground bunker at El Shifa hospital. They built the tunnels underneath El Shifa hospital and the bunker underneath El Shifa hospital back in the 70s.
And who's been using those bunkers?
Well, it doesn't really even get used as a bunker anymore. But there's like a room that's underground. They used to use that as like a military as like a military meeting checkpoint, secure location underneath the Al Shifa hospital.
As in the Israelis used to.
The Israelis, yeah, when they occupied Gaza back in the 70s. So like I say, like when you've used the Turkish hospital for a whole year as a military base, and then you controlled demolition, blow it up. Like, why blow it up with a controlled demolition? You're the one that's been in there for a whole year.
Yeah.
You know that there's nobody in there. You've obviously done your due diligence to use it as a military base and regular. Why blow it up then? Why not hand it over to the UN? Why not hand it into an organization, that can then facilitate using that hospital? But when you destroy the last remaining cancer hospital in Gaza, it's not just blowing up a hospital. It's a death sentence to everyone that's got cancer, and they know that.
Oof.
And then but the mainstream media, they'll say, oh yeah, they blew up the Turkish hospital. Why not tell us what they were doing in the Turkish hospital for the last year? They were using it as a military base.
Whilst people were coming in and getting treated for cancer?
No. No one was even allowed to go into it for a whole year. So, they put this entire hospital out of service for a whole year that no one was allowed to use it. And then when they were leaving it, they controlled demolition, blew up this Turkish hospital that was a cancer hospital. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just, to me, it's so ridiculous, because it's like, even if they were, right, even if Hamas were using like hospitals as military bases, right, yeah, you're doing the same.
Have you ever seen any Hamas fighters in these hospitals?
Well, the thing is you've got to remember is like, the Hamas guys, like, they don't wear their uniforms out in the streets, right? They'll do it for when they're doing their, handover of hostages, they might put on their uniforms. But generally day to day, you don't know who's Hamas and who's not Hamas. There's obviously the civilian Hamas government, you know what I mean? The civil service, like, the Minister of Health, or, these guys work within the government, but they're not the military wing. So those figures are known, but the actual military guys, apart from obviously like, the big names, no one really knows who these operatives are. You just don't know who they are. So,
was there any reason for you to believe there's some type of military operation going on in the hospital?
I mean, the thing is, you've got to remember, like, that's what I don't understand, like what people are saying, like what kind of a military base can you have in a hospital, right? Because there's so many people going in and out of the hospital. Literally, like there's so many people camping in the hospital grounds, like in tents. So you've got thousands of people in this secret location, right? And you've got all the press are there as well. And you've got all the international doctors and aid agencies that are there. They're all foreigners. And some of them obviously might be secret agents as well, scoping out the hospital. And we have unvetted access throughout the hospital. Like, I can go into any room in the hospital, no one will say anything. I can walk around anywhere else, I can say anything. So, there hasn't been a single doctor that I know of that's come out and said, yeah, I definitely saw, this and this happen. it's not to say that they might have not have been in it at some stage or hid in a room somewhere at some stage, right? Yeah. Like, I can't.
For it to be an official base.
Yeah, for it to be an official military
base. It's not plausible.
It boggles me a little bit, because I'm just like, it's a pretty silly place to have it, knowing that they purposely target hospitals. Like, it's not a safe place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
strategically it doesn't make sense.
Strategically, it doesn't make sense. And not even just that as well. It's just like, the Israelis will bomb anything. They bombed USS Liberty, American, boats, Navy boats before. So you're telling me they're not going to bomb a Palestinian hospital? So, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, when the whole thing, human shields, it doesn't matter to them. You could hide behind Israeli hostages. They'll still bomb you and kill you, because they've killed a lot of their own hostages. So none of it makes any sense to me. That's like the confusion about it. Because if we were just to report on it logically, if there was just to be common sense reporting and just reporting about the honesty of it, then when you say, yeah, okay, let's say Hamas are using it as a military base, you're using hospitals in Gaza as military bases, you're dressing up as doctors and nurses and patients like they did in Jenin last year, where they dressed up, the Secret Service went into a hospital in Jenin and they executed a paralyzed man.
What? I did not know this.
And you don't know this?
No.
There's videos, you can have a look at it. It made headline news in the UK. So they went into a hospital in Jenin, dressed as doctors and nurses, and even one of them...
Who, the IDF?
Yeah. There's like a Secret Service of them, and they even had wheelchairs as well. Someone came in with a wheelchair. They came into this hospital, then they, came out with their guns, and they executed this militant in the hospital who had already been there. He was injured. He was there as a quadriplegic. He was paralyzed from the neck down. And they executed him in his bed, shot him in the head, dressed as doctors and nurses.
So it's actually them, if anything.
Yeah. When they say, Hamas uses Palestinians as human shields, there's videos of them tying up Palestinians to their military trucks as they drive in the West Bank. Again, if there was honest reporting, do you know what I mean? So,
how would the reporting be different? Like right now, obviously, free press is not allowed inside of Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? Free international press is not allowed inside of Gaza. Yeah. Obviously, if they were to be allowed, they would be able to document at a much more precise and dramatic level.
Yeah.
But still, we see the horrors.
Yeah.
Right? We see the horrors. But at the same time, the horrors that we see online on social media, it's nothing compared to what you're actually seeing when you're actually there.
Yeah.
So what would be different about the reporting right now if the free press was allowed access?
Well, I mean,
what would they say that's different?
Well, look, you'd have a lot more in-depth analysis, of what's going on. You'd be able to tie the story. I mean, there's not a free movement. If you want to do a report, like a full report as a journalist, you might need to speak to this person here. You might need to look at the site over here, put all the things together to come up with the story, right? There's no free movement in Gaza because, you've got kill zones here. This road is blocked off and it's dangerous to go from one side of Gaza to the other. So because of that, like, you have a testimony from this guy here, but he might have been transported via ambulance because, his leg's blown off or whatever. But he's telling you the story of how, he saw the execution of these particular people. Like the 12-year-old kid that's just been assassinated, the one who saw the paramedics be killed. The eyewitness to that, who gave his first statement and was going to give his second statement, he was executed. He was shot, sniped to the head. So, if there's reporters on the ground there,
they can connect all the dots.
But right now we're getting scattering of dots, and they need the scattering of dots to keep, us in this bubble of like, is it true? Is it not true?
There's some wiggle room.
There's wiggle room, but it's got to the stage now where 19 months, the same excuses, they're not flying anymore. Yeah.
Was there a particular patient that you developed a connection with?
There's a lot of them. I remember like when I came the second time round, we had had all these kids coming to see me, and they had like pictures and banners that they'd drawn for me. And, they would walk 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers on foot just to come see me and give me the little gifts that they made for me because of like, the connection I had with them from the first time that I saw them. But, like I say, it's home.
What has this experience done for your relationship with Allah, for your iman?
It's made me, to be honest with you, like it's been scary. I feel accountable for everything that I do. I feel like I've seen death and how fragile life is, and how, when you see kids, like I say, with bread in their hands, they were eating. In that moment, dying when you're eating, right? Yeah.
Had they been shot?
They'd been shot, blown up, all the rest of it. But I remember, like, when you're eating, right, yeah, and you're hungry, there's that urge, especially in Gaza, right, yeah, they're all hungry. So you've just got this bread in your hand and you're about to eat, and it's that feeling of hunger is about to go away, right? What's your focus on that moment with the bread? It's the eating, the satisfaction of the relief. In that moment of relief was when they were killed. And to me, that was it was a prominent thing. It really stuck with me, because I was just thinking to myself, like, when the relief came is when they died. Death does not discriminate. When you're in moments of pain or moments of elevation, it'll come when it comes.
SubhanAllah.
And it made me really think about death in a different way, that death can come at any time. And, the way that people would live their lives in Gaza is they would just have tawakkul all the time. If Allah's written for me death now or death tomorrow, it's going to happen. So just continue living life. I would walk to and from work, I'd walk to and from the hospital. And, sometimes when I was walking to and from the hospitals, the area would get bombed that I was walking to and from, like literally hundreds of meters away, the areas would be bombed. And, people would still, as soon as the bombs and the debris, people would just come out and continue walking around or whatever. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, that's tawakkul. Like, if death comes for them, it comes for them. They're not running away. They're just samdeen, they're just living where they are. And whatever happens, happens. And they just embraced death like that. And that was something that I just thought was like, one was them embracing death, and two, it was just seeing death come whenever. You would see, like I say, kids on Eid who had their Eid money in their hands when they were brought in dead. Children that died in their parents' arms, as they were hugging them and then the missile hit. Children dying while their mother was carrying them or breastfeeding them. Like, when you see death like that, it hits differently. Like, you begin to understand that death is on its own terms, not on your terms. And I know everyone knows that, but to really see it, like, look, it's not even that death won't come in this particular moment where you're having this particular moment of relief. It could come then as well. It could come in that moment of elevation for you. It can come in that happy moment for you. Even just before Gaza, I remember even just working as a doctor in Australia, we had a patient who come in with a heart attack, and we were doing CPR on him. And it was a man in a suit. And you know what he had in his hand? What? He had his speech, because it was his daughter's wedding, and he was giving the speech for his daughter's wedding. And he died. He had a heart attack while he was giving this speech, and he collapsed, and they brought him into hospital. We were doing CPR on him, and he died. He died literally with the speech in his hand of him giving away his daughter in his suit. And I remember his daughter coming in with her husband in her wedding dress. And I just thought, there's no mercy in death. There's no mercy in death. And death can be violent. Death can be peaceful. You just have to prepare for death. I remember the exact hadith, but it's like the equalizer, or is death. Death is the thing that
destroys the pleasures.
It destroys the pleasures. Death is the destroyer of pleasures.
Yeah. أكثر ذكر هذه من اللذات.
Yeah. That you really, really, really understand. And that's the thing, is because, as human beings, when we learn lessons, it's one thing being told about it. Death is a destroyer of pleasures. But go over there to Gaza and watch children die as they're eating. Children die while they're hugging their mother. A man dying while he's giving away his daughter. These things, they always permeate with me, because it always just reminds me that death can come at any moment. You
mentioned at the beginning that the our brothers and sisters in Palestine have been dehumanized, and it's always a pattern that we see when you want to slaughter people like animals. First, you have to take their humanity. You have to basically remove the human element from them.
Yep.
We've seen that throughout history whenever that's been done. I want to give you an opportunity now to rehumanize our brothers and sisters. Talk to us. Who are the people of Gaza, and what did you see from them that was great, that touched you?
Well, obviously the story of the kid holding my hand and calming me down when it was bombing, and I'm just like, I should be the one calming this child down, but he's calming me down. As I was leaving Gaza, they were offering me food to take for the journey back, even though there was a blockade on food. And I remember telling the woman, I said, they're not even letting food into Gaza. How do you want me to take food out of Gaza? There was, when I was treating this child, I remember when I was treating this child and he had like a broken arm. He was about 12 years old. And he just said to me, I'm okay. He says, I'm good. I'm okay. He had like a blood coming out from his head there and he had a broken arm. And he said, go see that child over there first. You know what I mean? I'm okay. And then the nurse whispered in my ear as I was leaving. She went, his whole family's dead. He's an orphan now. But I just remember thinking like how this child, despite his pain and grief, he's telling me to go see this other child that's crying in pain. He's okay. 12-year-old child. He has every right in the world to be like, I need all the attention right now. I need you to help me. Don't help anybody. I've lost my whole family. But he was more concerned about the other kids that were crying. He was like, I'm okay. I'm on Aquarius. An Aquarius, he would say, I'm good. You go help them over there. That really permeated with me. Just like even the children of Gaza, the empathy that they have. I mean, you see it on when food is being handed out, and that one child's pan is empty. He's not managed to get the food in time, and then the children scoop out from their own pans and they put it into that child's. And that child ends up having more food in his pan than all of them because they're just giving him more food. And that child is carrying food for their entire family, but yet they see that child. I mean, they're the best people, and what's happening to them. It's hard to watch because the beauty in these people, like, you see the paramedics, the Palestinian civil defense, the guys that are digging people out with their own hands, and the bombs are raining down. There was that video of that part of the civil defense worker when they were told that the drones are coming back to bomb the house, they need to leave, and this guy's leg was stuck. And the guy said to him, go, just leave me. Oof. And the civil defense guys was like, we're here with you, trying to dig him out, even though he knows that the house is going to be bombed. Do you know the paramedics who drive in knowing that they get executed, knowing that they get bombed, drive into there to bring back the bodies? These people are, I remember even like when I, had this, because over the road from the hospital there was a pharmacy, and I went to go get medicine from the pharmacy for a patient. This patient had no money and they needed medicine, so I was going to go buy them the medicine from the pharmacy. And I went into this pharmacy and, this guy was sat down, the owner of the pharmacy, and he was just reading Quran. And I said to him, look, I need these medications. And, he got me them and he said, oh, Inta bin Wayne. And, because you could see on my lapel, I had the Australian flag and the British flag, right? And I had a watermelon underneath. And then I said to him, I'm from Australia and the UK. And then he went, oh, you don't pay for this. He went, you've come here to help us. He goes, the least I can do is give you this for free. And I said to him, they're not for me, they're for one of the patients. I went, so I'll pay. Because he wanted to give me for free. I was like, it's not for me, it's for someone else, let me pay. And then he went, oh, you're giving this away to somebody else. He goes, now I have to give it to you for free. And I just said, no, I said, this is your business, it's your mashru', this is this is how you make money, you need to make a living. I've got the money, don't worry about me, let me just pay. And he said to me, no. He goes, look, I could have left here months ago. He says, I've got a brother in the UAE, I've got a brother in France, in Germany, I think it was. They offered to take me out of Gaza and I had the opportunity to leave. And I told him, why did you stay? He goes, because my people need help. He goes, I run the pharmacy here.
SubhanAllah.
Do you know? He could run, and he's there for his people. You know, these people are just, they're so special. They're so special. And I feel like I've not done enough for them. I feel ashamed that I can't do more for them. But I'm going to keep trying.
What's something important about your experience in Gaza that we haven't yet talked about?
You know, that's a tough question because, you know, I've done a lot of interviews talking about Gaza and stuff like that. I think, you know, a lot of doctors, when they talk about Gaza, maybe they don't talk about it the way that I do, but it's different for me. You know, it's family. Some of those children that I treated had my last surname from my family. You know, it's different for me. So I view the Gaza experience in a different way. I have a different experience to other people. I speak Arabic. A lot of the foreign doctors that go there maybe don't speak Arabic. They don't have these stories to tell. When there's a mass casualty event and people are screaming, you know, they don't hear the words that are being said. They just hear the screams. But I hear the words. Mothers screaming, you know, saying, Yamma, Yamma, like, you know, we waited 12 years to have you. You know. They don't hear those words. They don't hear the screams where, you know, I remember this one man, and he was just, you know, to his child, and he was just going, Yalla yaba, like, come on dad, you know, because that's what they say. They call, you know, your father calls you dad, your mother calls you mum. So it's the thing in our culture. And he goes, Yalla yaba, come on, I got you the food. Come on, get up, I got you the food, because he went to go get food. And as he was out getting food, his child was killed. You know, I hear those stories, and I hear him saying and talking to his dead child. He goes, Yalla yaba, boom yaba, yalla, yalla, hey ummakon, yalla, come on, get up, come on. We're all here now, it's going to be okay, I got the food.
And he's dead.
But he's talking to him like he's alive. I hear those stories that maybe other foreign doctors don't hear. That's why, like, I have a different experience when they go there. It haunts me more because of that. And obviously as well, like, working in the emergency department is different when you're a surgeon. You know, when you're a surgeon, you might come down to the emergency department once or twice, you know, if there's like a big event or whatever. But when you're in the emergency department 24/7, I'm the one dealing with the mass casualty events. I'm the one that has to watch them die in front of me en masse. You might have a patient that dies on the operating table. I've got 20 patients dying in front of me. You know what I mean? It's different. So I think that's what makes my experience maybe just a little bit more unique to other people's experiences.
So, doctor, since you've come back,
Yep.
You've been on a mission.
Yep.
What's your mission?
My mission is to get a children's hospital into Gaza. But, you know, it's not just about the children's hospital. It's about the journey of getting this children's hospital into Gaza. I want the conversation to change about how we talk about Palestine, right, and how we talk about Gaza. And I want to focus on the humanity of children. Because no matter who you are, what side of the aisle you're on, we can all agree on the innocence of children. And if you can't agree on the innocence and the humanity of children, then you're probably someone that I was never going to win over anyway.
Yep.
But I want to win over people. And the way to do that is to mobilize people to get this hospital in. And, you know, getting a Western hospital into Gaza, it changes everything.
What does it change?
It has buy-in now for Western audiences, for Western people to view how the way that they view Gaza and the Middle East. Suddenly it's not a distant or a foreign place anymore.
Are there any Western hospitals in Gaza?
Well, there's NGOs in there. There's like American NGOs, Western NGOs, but they're not government-led, national, you know, hospitals. What I want to do is I want to change it. I want to have an Australian field hospital in Gaza with oversight of the Australian government, because look, Gaza is a unique place. You can't have NGOs anymore running these hospitals because they get bombed.
Yes.
So we need governments and NGOs working together. But instead of having, the Indonesian hospital or the Kuwaiti hospital, or do you know what I mean? Or the Turkish hospital, they're not cutting it anymore because, they're these Muslim, and nobody cares when a Muslim country's hospital gets bombed in Gaza. Okay. But they will care if it's a British hospital. Mm. They will care when it's an Australian hospital. They will care when it's the American hospital. And not just an American NGO, like the government hospital. That's what I want to do. I want to change the way that we do healthcare to protect these facilities so we can provide care for these children. And then what happens is when you get a hospital into Gaza, you don't just get a hospital into Gaza. You get Western doctors in there. Uh-huh. You get Western cameras in there. And then those Western cameras can tell the story of these children to a Western audience. Uh-huh. And then you start winning the hearts and minds of people in the West. Uh-huh. And then you humanize these people again. Uh-huh. And that's what it's about. It's about rehumanizing the Palestinian people. Uh-huh.
So this obviously seems like more than just building a hospital. Yeah. It seems like it's a way to kind of get the media in, to get the truth out there as well. And I think that's very it's very powerful, mashallah, because one of the things that I think pretty much every one of our audience that's going to be watching is going to relate to me when I say this. Yeah. We've been looking at what's been happening for 2 years, and even prior to that, for decades. Yeah. The question has come to mind, like, what can we do? Yeah. And one of the things that I've always tried to speak to people about is when you do something, you want to do something that's effective. Yeah. You don't want to do something for the sake of doing. Like I can go and jump on top of a double-decker bus in central London and raise a Palestinian flag and say Free Palestine. Is that going to do anything? Yeah. We've had the world's largest protest that we've ever had for any cause. Yeah. And I'm not entirely convinced that we need another protest. Yeah. At some point you've got to be like, I'm hitting my head against this wall. Yep. And the only thing that's happening is that my brain is getting damaged. Yeah. I have to now go around the wall, under the wall, over the wall. So I love that you've had this concept of just attacking the problem from a different perspective.
Well, look, it's not even just about that, right? It's, for a Western government to do this, it's controversial, right? There's a lot of people that are not going to want a Western government to have a hospital there. Uh-huh. There's a lot of racism and people just don't value Muslim and Palestinian lives there. Uh-huh. But what I want is I just don't even want it to be about Gaza. I want it to change the dynamic that we have in the Middle East with these Western countries. I want them to view us in a way where you don't have to drop bombs on us and sanction us to get influence in the Middle East. You can have influence by feeding the Middle East, by healing the Middle East. That's how you can have your buy-in. Yeah. Your buy-in doesn't have to be funding, militias, destabilizing the region. The way that you can actually win over the hearts and minds of the masses is by feeding them and healing them. Yeah. And this is what this hospital does. It's going to be, when it's done and people see the positive reverberations that it has for Australia standing, the UK standing in the Middle East because of this, it's going to change the way Western governments deal with the way they deal in the Middle East.
So you don't have any political background, right? Or any diplomatic background. No. You're a doctor who's been to a war zone and come back. Yeah. And you've now basically this project is underway. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. We're going to discuss some of the stuff that you've already done. But I just want to know what gave you the audacity to even think it's possible to get to mobilize the Australian government to actually build a hospital in a war zone where there's going to be a lot of friction for the Australian government to even do that because of how strong the Zionist lobby is, right? What even gave you the audacity to think it's possible? Because I would have thought you have to have some type of influence, political position to be able to do that type of stuff.
Yeah, I just, one thing that taught me, let's say, was tawakkul. I just put my faith in Allah that I could get this done. And, I've had meetings with the foreign minister in Australia within 6 days after I landed in Australia. No media behind me, no money behind me, just my voice. And I've met with, I sold out Parliament House Palestinian selling out Parliament House and people coming to speak, made headline news all over Australia. I've had people now writing into their MPs, thousands, wanting to see this hospital in Gaza. I've met diplomats in Jordan about building the hospital in Jordan. I've had the CEO of UNICEF meet me, and I've showed him my plans, and he likes it. I've been in contact with the CEO of World Central Kitchen, who wants to know about this plan and see how they can help.
Oh, wow.
I've spoken with the humanitarian wing of the Indonesian government, who said that they're willing to help.
And what was the reason for the Indonesian government? Why?
Well, the Indonesian government in Australia, you know, when the Prime Minister won his election, the first country that he visited was Indonesia.
And why is that?
It's a very important strategic ally.
Okay.
You know, economically for Australia.
And geographically as well,
And
right?
geographically, militarily, all of it. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world.
Yes.
They love the Palestinian cause and they love Palestinian people.
And Australia needs to maintain good
relationships with Indonesia. And Indonesia also has the experience of running a field hospital in Gaza, the Indonesian hospital.
Okay.
So what better strategic alliance than getting the Indonesian government to help the Australian government in this project? And it builds further diplomatic connections and it wins Indonesians over about Australia, because they say, look, these Australians, these non-Muslim country is helping our Muslim brothers in Gaza. That's going to further allow the political situation in Indonesia to have stronger economic ties with Australia and be more cooperative with Australia. So the Australian government wins, the Australian people win. I just realized you have to be pragmatic with this. Everyone wants to win. I don't care if I'm the one that loses at the end of this. I just want the hospital in Gaza. I don't care if they call it Benjamin Netanyahu's pediatric hospital of excellence. Just get me the damn hospital into Gaza. So I don't care who I need to speak to get it done. But if it means that I have to create diplomatic relationships in different countries and speak to the ambassador of this country and speak to diplomats in this country, that's what I've been doing. And I've been doing it because the world has changed. You know, I've had people come and approach us and say, we want to help you out. We're, diplomats and we know how this system works and we'll write you letters and blah, 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 blah. And then I've had other organizations saying, well, you don't know what it's like. We need, you need governance and blah, 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 blah. And I've just said, you know what? You guys have all been doing this for 2 years and you've done nothing. Nothing. I was like, maybe it's time that someone just didn't follow the rule book. Maybe it's time someone just did something that people weren't doing. You just call out people on social media. I just go out there and write a letter. I go out there and make myself available and talk. I have the blueprints ready for what kind of hospital we need in Gaza. And, I've talked to foundations, the Minderoo Foundation, which is an Australian foundation. But, the reason why we've gone with the Minderoo Foundation and not, say, Islamic Relief or One Ummah or other these Muslim organizations is because the idea of this hospital, like I said from the start, the idea isn't the hospital. It's the journey to get the hospital. It's to win the hearts and minds of the middle ground, right? Of the average Australian, the average Brit.
Because you want their hospital in Gaza. So they have to be behind it.
Exactly.
And they're not going to get behind a Muslim cause.
They're not going to get behind a Muslim cause because regardless of what people think is a Muslim cause, even the most liberal non-Muslim is going to be hesitant donating to an Islamic Relief or something like that because they think this is all just a Muslim hospital. I want them to think of it.
They've been led to believe that this might go terrorism. And
exactly. I want them to believe in it as a national project, as an Australian project. So, the Minderoo Foundation was the perfect fit because, the CEO of the Minderoo Foundation on the board it's run by Andrew Forrest, which is a, mining billionaire tycoon in Australia. He has donated over 50 million to Gaza.
Okay. So he's sympathetic.
He's sympathetic to us. His daughter is a human rights activist who's, well versed in all of these issues. These are the correct people to lead something like this. They have connections with the Jordanian government. They've donated before to the Jordanian health service that helps Gaza. They have talks or communication lines with Israeli government as well. They're the ideal fit for this. So therefore we go with them. Then we have, and so then we go with that. And then also as well, the average Australian will now look at it as an Australian project. what we want is like, even if they donate all the money for the hospital, we can make the hospital bigger or whatever. But the idea is we want a donation campaign where we travel around and we get people to donate to this hospital, because when you donate to the hospital, you have buy-in into the hospital. You care now if it gets bombed because you donated.
Because you donated.
The average mum might do a cake stall for this hospital, right, and sell these cakes. And
so you're trying to make it a fully national thing.
I'm going to make it a national thing.
Mums, dads, children, schools get involved. Hey guys, we're building this children's hospital in Gaza.
And it's not even just about the fundraising. You know, like the design of the camp, of the caravans, you know, that are going to have the wards. I want the children of Australia to help design the artwork for those caravans, because what it does is it's for the psychological welfare of the children in Gaza, and also the buy-in where, you know, it's children helping children as well. They're designing the camper vans. They're designing the artwork that goes under there. They submit the little drawings that they have, and we stick them up on the caravans.
Have they started submitting them?
No.
This is the plan.
This is the plan, right? Once we start getting that, once we get the approval and we start the buildings, then that's the next step of it.
Dr. Mohammed, I mentioned to you earlier, and I feel compelled to mention it on the camera again. Like I'm really impressed by this approach, alarm belling. And the reason I really want to highlight it, because I really want our brothers and sisters who are watching to take a page out of this book. You know, diplomacy and negotiation is something that's so important in getting to a end goal. You know, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. I love how you describe that this could be something where everyone wins. Fundamentally, we don't want it to be a zero-sum game. Well, we don't want to be chasing a zero-sum game that we don't ever achieve, but in the process, all that happens is more children's heads are being blown up. At the end of the day, how can we get to a deal or a conclusion that actually benefits everyone? And fundamentally, it's true. You've got to get if you need some external entities' help, you've got to make them. You've got to tickle their selfish bone. Make them feel like this is something that we're doing for ourselves. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And the problem here is that being emotional prevents you from having this type of insight. You know, when you can just look at something and say, look, let me just calm down my emotions for a second. I actually want to help the people. How can I position this in, like, it's actually pretty crazy, right? Like it is, number one, it's your project. It's for your people. But I actually want it to be seen as an Australian cause, because that's actually going to be more effective than it being, you know, the hospital of Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, for example. I think is very smart. It's very smart, and it just shows that things can be done. Like the Prophet ﷺ, I actually was with Professor Joe Hayward, who is a revert to Islam. He accepted Islam after 9/11.
Wow.
Because he studied world leaders for like the last 2,000-3,000 years, the most effective generals, world leaders, strategists. And after 9/11, he realized he had never studied the Prophet ﷺ. And then when he studied his life, he fell in love with him, accepted Islam, and said, this man was a master in all things that you look for in a great man, on top of that strategy. And he's currently authoring a book on the Prophet's diplomacy. Like how he would, when he would come to Medina, the first thing he did was he made contracts with the Jews. And he made treaties with all of these different tribes. Look, guys, we don't want to get into a scrap right now. It doesn't help anyone. For us to fight you to fight us. So let's establish these treaties of peace. It was always the other side that broke the treaty, but the Muslim had the foresight to think, let me set this up, because that gives us scope and margin to be able to get the work done. So this is very good. Like you, some of the things you mentioned about how you've managed to get the buy-in from the Jewish community here as well.
Well, I mean, look, your intention has to be correct. Right. If my thing was just like, I'm going to lie and deceive to get this hospital in and, these people, everyone wins, but just as long as you get there. I really want this to be about bringing people together. I want this hospital to heal everyone. And, as a Muslim community, we can't shy away from the fact that anti-Semitism has been a problem. People have been anti-Semitic. And there's a difference between having a problem with what Israel is doing and then just labeling all Jewish people as bad. And we have to extend an olive branch to people who have been leading the pro-Palestine movement, a lot of them have been Jewish as well. And this is a way to build community between these two affected communities and build them to come back together. And, I reached out to the Jewish community in Australia, the Jewish Council, and I said to them, look, I want to do a fundraising event and I want the Jewish community to be involved. And they loved the idea. They want to do it. And I just think it would be so powerful if we had these rabbis and sheikhs sat down, outbidding each other of who's going to donate more. Think about how powerful that is.
Wow.
How powerful that is for the country as an image of Muslims and Jews fighting to save these children in Gaza, fighting who's going to do more. Think about what that does to the psyche.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It breaks down walls and barriers. This is what I mean about everybody wins.
Yeah.
We also win with the temperature of the country also wins. Society begins to have more social cohesion.
Yeah.
So, whatever side you're looking at it, even if you're a right-winger, you know what I mean? Even if you're pro-Israeli, you want to see this, you want to see anti-Semitism come down.
Yeah.
Right? And this is one way of doing it.
Yeah.
And, it also allows the political environment in the country. It's about the political environment as well, because if Muslims and Jews are working together to fundraise for the hospital, how can the government say no at that stage?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The two disenfranchised communities are now, not all of them, not everyone, but a big fraction of them are working together for this, for the betterment of this hospital.
So how do you make this an Australian cause?
How do I make it?
Yeah, as in what about this makes this Australian?
Well, I mean, look, the way that we make this an Australian cause is, one, is we get the Australian public to support it.
But what's the incentive here?
For them to support it.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of people in Australia, there has been a history in Australia with the Indigenous community in Australia, the genocide of the Indigenous, the Aboriginal people, the poverty of Indigenous communities in Australia. There's a lot of hurt there. And there's a lot of people that want to right that wrong.
Okay. And they carry that guilt.
There's a lot of people that carry that guilt. And it's not just like, it's a guilt that we all, everyone that was there is watching it. And it's not a guilt necessarily of like, oh, I feel so guilty for what happened. It's like, we can learn from this and do better. And right now there's an opportunity in the world where we're seeing this group of Indigenous people, right? And it's not arguing about whether...
It's the same story, basically.
It's the same story. And we're not arguing about, it's the Palestinians that are Indigenous and not the Jewish. We're just saying that this is a group of Indigenous people there. And they're seeing themselves in that struggle. They're seeing the way that they're being dehumanized, the Palestinian people, and the way that they're being killed and their land taken from them. And, this very much has a strong connection with Australia. And not just that as well, there's a breakdown in the social cohesion in Australia. There's a large Lebanese community in Australia.
Correct.
Lebanon has been heavily affected by what's gone on. And there's a large Muslim community as well. And there's a large Jewish community. So the social cohesion in the country has been at a fever pitch. This is something to restore that. And not just that as well. What it does for Australia as an Australian cause is, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, kept saying that we're not a major player in the Middle East. And I flipped that around and said, well, you don't have to be a major player in the Middle East to be a major healer in the Middle East. You don't have to be a major player in the Middle East to be a major feeder in the Middle East. And what does that do when all around the Middle East you're going and you're seeing Australian doctors, Australian hospitals there? The Middle East is going to be the new Europe in 10 years' time. It's getting rebuilt. Syria's going to get rebuilt. Lebanon's going to get rebuilt. Gaza's going to get rebuilt. The West Bank is going to get rebuilt. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. I mean, these places are leading the world.
Correct.
Right? And Australia has a lot of minerals and resources and a lot of mining expertise. And it has some of the best mines in the world when it comes to engineers.
So once those contracts.
Get those contracts. Right? You don't have to get those contracts by being a military might here. Get those contracts by winning over the hearts and minds.
Like China's done in Africa,
like China's done in Africa, Win the hearts and minds.
Pakistan, they've been doing
in Pakistan as well. I mean, look, there's a little bit of exploitation there as well. But do you know, what is their strategy ultimately is you win and we win. So let them win. There's been enough bloodshed in the Middle East, right? Let's change the strategy, right? Heal the Middle East, feed the Middle East, and then, these big contracts and this big presence can come in the Middle East, but you can lead the way. You don't have to be a superpower to lead the way. Do you know what I mean? You just have to have a bit of courage and a bit of strength. And all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get them to understand that and see that. And it's because, someone like me has got a unique perspective. I'm from the Middle East, but I grew up in the West. I played for England students team in rugby. You know,
For England?
England students team. You know,
So
I've played.
good then.
I love my Tim Tams and, like, you know, having a barbecue like everybody else in Australia. You know, I understand both cultures and both sides, and I think what happens is a lot of people in the West, they look at the Middle East as this foreign concept, and like Islam is this foreign thing. But actually, like, you know, you look at the way people live here in the Middle East. You know, housing, for example, right? Yeah, we're some of the poorest countries in the world. We don't have a housing problem like they do right in the West. Why is that? Because, you know, things like land and the way communities are together, we look after each other. Even in poverty, we look after each other. You know, over there in the West, they don't necessarily do it. You could learn something from the Middle East. I'm not saying you take everything away from the Middle East, but there are certain things that you can learn from the Middle East that can benefit your societies. And what's lucky about, say, people like us, right, is we've grown up, you know, we are from these Muslim communities, and we're very well connected within that part of the world. But at the same time as well, we've grown up in the West. And because of that, we take the good and the bad from both. We know what's good works here well and what doesn't work here well, but we also, there's understanding. Do you know what I mean? I understand when when somebody in the West wants to do what makes them happy rather than what their parents make. I understand the thinking. You go tell that to, like, a Middle Eastern family, they think they're being selfish and this, that, and the other. Whereas, like, I'm looking at it, I'm going, like, no, I understand that girl's struggle. You know, she wants to be independent and she wants to do this. She wants to make something of herself for herself. I understand that mentality, that where that feminism, say, comes from, right? Yeah. It's not necessarily always guided in the right place, but I understand the heart of where it's coming from. But at the same time, I understand the Middle East, where they feel like they need to restrict you a little bit and control the way that you do this for your own safety. I understand both. I've lived in both, right? And because of that, it gives us a unique experience, and it gives us a unique perspective. And I'm just trying to use that perspective to build the bridges, right? Yeah, I can build you that bridge. I'm, you know, as Muslim, like I'm a Muslim guy, right? Yeah, but at the same time as well, like, you know, I like rugby and Yorkshire pudding and fish and chips, and do you know what I mean? Like, I'm.
Do they have fish and chips in Australia?
Yeah. they have good fish and chips in Australia, to be fair. But, you know, like because of that, I know where the bridges can be built. Yeah, and I'm just leveraging my life experience in this project, and I really feel like if we can build these bridges in these certain areas, then it can benefit everybody. Everybody wins. And ultimately, it's not just about helping the kids in Gaza and stopping the children dying in Gaza. Ultimately, it's about a bigger vision, which is to change the way that the West views the Middle East. It's to change the way that the West views Muslims. It's to change the way that our standing in this world. And one way of doing that is by changing how we deal with the Middle East. And rather than bombing the Middle East or sanctioning the Middle East, we go over there and we win the hearts and minds of the Middle East. And we do that by helping the children.
And it has to be in this pragmatic way, because, like, you know, even I came across this guy who was a military strategist. His name was Little Heart. He engineered some of the fundamental strategies for the Allies against Nazi Germany in World War II. He's got a book called Strategy, and he studied 280 major conflicts over the last 2,000 years. He concluded that only 2% of them were won where you attacked the enemy head on, right, where you went toe to toe with the enemy. 98% of them were won through things, through everything else. Through everything else. So it's like, if you want to help our brothers and sisters who clearly are blockaded, starved, bombs over their head by a world superpower, you've got to start thinking outside the box now. What can we do to solve this problem once and for all? And you have to do these type of things. Even when you look at the Prophet ﷺ in the Battle of Ahzab, where many people were actually not aware of the context about it was actually genocide. So the intention was genocide. What happened was that they got an army of 10,000 people. 10,000 people. Which was made off of Quraysh, Ghatfan, which was another major tribe, and there was Jewish tribes involved. This massive army of 10,000 soldiers that had come, and it put with the intention to just uproot the Muslims, to just slaughter them.
Yeah.
To give you context, in the city of Medina, the population was only about 5,000.
Yeah.
5,000-6,000. So the entire population was 5,000-6,000.
Yeah.
Right.
That included women and children.
Women and children. So the army was larger than the size of the population.
Yeah.
So even when like the IDF came into Gaza, I think they deployed like 100,000 soldiers or something at the beginning or something like that. But that was like 1/5 of the population.
Yeah.
Here, the army that came there was for every one civilian, there was 2 soldiers wanting to massacre them. So this is the way Allah described this battle in the Quran is very scary. Allah said your hearts went into your throats.
Yeah.
You know, your eyes were in shock because of how scary it was.
Yeah.
That's the description Allah gave. And what was it that Allah used to help the Muslims? It was an idea that because I love what you said about how, you know, you're bringing 2 different cultures and experiences. Salman Farisi, who was a Persian, that had left Persia in search for the Prophet ﷺ, accepted Islam, but he came with that Persian background. He said, "Oh Messenger of Allah," he goes, "there's a strategy that we use in Persia that the Arabs don't know about. We build trenches." So when
the battle of the trench.
The battle of the trench.
Right.
So he said, if we can build a trench around Medina, then what that does is because we
can concentrate their armies.
We can stop them from getting in.
Yeah.
So the Prophet loved the idea.
Yeah.
Genius, right? Like as in the Arabs hadn't seen. And you know why this was actually crazy?
Why?
Is because the Arabs, by their culture, you know the word tahur?
Stubbornness.
Like recklessness. Recklessness is in there's bravery, there's recklessness. The Arabs were known for recklessness. Right? They were known for there was bravery, but then I'm gonna die here, no problem. So this was seen as like a cowardly tactic. So no. Where's the honor in this? We're gonna build a trench. No, we'll die. You know, we'll die on our swords. So the person was able to be like, no, we're not. That doesn't benefit the cause. That doesn't benefit the cause. I've been sent as a mercy to all of mankind. That doesn't benefit mankind if we die here. So they built this trench, and that idea allowed. What happened? Subhanallah, it allowed the Muslims to be protected.
Subhanallah.
Allah. And there's so much more happened. There's so many more details and other things the Prophet did. And then finally, Allah just sent a wind. And here's where we need to take into account the divine intervention. Is that happened, and then once you've done your bit, then Allah Azza wa Jal
does the rest.
He does the rest. And Allah sent a wind that was so powerful and so strong that they couldn't even light a fire. It was just too strenuous to keep an army of 10,000 there. They all went back. Allahu Akbar. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, this is the type of thinking that I want us to start having now. Where it's just getting angry and just doing another protest. It's not going to work. It hasn't. Start thinking strategically. And the reason I wanted to really just kind of highlight this is because you always need examples of people that have done it before you to show it's possible. The fact that you are a rugby playing, British doctor, Allah Malik, who has been to the battlefield, treated people, or the war zone, and come back and then been able to mobilize all of these big government officials to be able to help, start this project of building this hospital. I think it's phenomenal, man. MashaAllah.
SubhanAllah. I'm just, look, I'm just one person, and I've got a guy helping me in this. He's like my right hand man, and it's only us two.
Okay.
Everything that you see, everything that we've done, it's just the two of us. And the intention is, the one thing I worry about is my intention. I just want my intention to remain pure. I'm so scared that I'll have the wrong intention one day, or I'm getting all this attention and publicity, that I just want my intention to stay pure. That's the call. Is I don't want to be corrupted by this. I don't want this to corrupt me. But it's hard. It's hard. Not the intention, but it's hard. It's hard to do this. It's hard to be out in the public, out in the forum, exposing your life. But someone's got to do it. Someone's got to make a stand. And I would just, a lot of people have this self-doubt talk, and I had that all the time, where I was just like, I'm just one person. I'm just a doctor. I'm not a world-renowned doctor like my father. I'm not a world-renowned doctor like these other doctors that go into Gaza. They're all a lot older than me. I'm probably the youngest doctor that went to Gaza.
Really? Wow.
You know what I mean? I'm probably the youngest, I'm a trainee, all of them are close. I'm probably the youngest one, or one of the youngest volunteer doctors that went. And there were people that would look down on me, that I'm this young trainee. What are you doing here? And there was a lot of self-doubt where I was like, I don't know if I could do this. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe someone better than me could do this. But then, I thought to myself, like, Annie, why not me? Why not me? Because there I am. These people are just regurgitating the same stories, resharing the same things, and not doing anything. And I'm like, well, let me at least try to do something. And subhanAllah, like in 5-6 weeks, just coming out of Gaza. I was sat on a boat with Greta Thunberg a few days ago.
Oh, you were on the boat?
I was on the boat, yeah.
Oh, you okay.
The one that just went, yeah. I was there supporting them as they were leaving. But they invited me to come because they'd seen,
they stopped the boat or something, right?
It's still in the sea right now.
Okay.
But, we'll see what happens to them. But, I was on the boat before it set sail, talking with Greta and Tiago and those guys. I have sat down in the halls of Parliament in Australia. I've met the foreign minister. I've met Jordanian diplomats. I've talked with Indonesian diplomats. I've talked with the CEO of UNICEF. I've been approached by different NGOs from all over the world. And I've done that as one individual with just a message of that we can get this done. And, I think it just shows to people, anybody. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a politician. I don't have money behind me. I'm alone a lot of the time when I do this, and it's scary. But I just put my faith in Allah that I can get this done. And, whatever happens, happens. But we're making good progress. Alhamdulillah. We're making good progress.
That key ingredients of sincerity and tawakkul.
Yeah.
Like sincerity, as if you do it for Allah's sake, as the scholars say, ma kana lillahi yabqa.
Yeah.
Whatever is for Allah will remain.
Yeah.
And Allah Azza wa Jalla will bring His cause into effect with or without you. So just jump on that bandwagon with sincerity and rely upon Allah. Sometimes we underestimate ourselves, and rightly so. But we're not alone. Allah is with us.
Yeah.
So then now the optimism just goes through the roof.
Yeah.
And anything is possible with Allah's permission.
And you hear about all these crazy stories of people like, coming from nothing and doing something or whatever. And I just, I kept looking at myself. I kept saying like, I'm looking around and I'm seeing these policymakers and these politicians, and they make such silly decisions. And like, I'm like, why? That's so stupid. Like, you look at the election campaign of the Democrats in America, and like, they were just making like basic errors. That like even as like, well, like say for example for Democrats, the Palestine issue was a big issue and they just wouldn't talk about it. She, her field,
Kamala
Harris is, the people that she needs to support her are the left-leaning people, but yet she's out there with Dick Cheney's like wife or daughter, campaigning and then talking about how they're going to have a mighty army. And I'm like, this is not what your base wants. Like, you are acting like a diet Donald Trump, and that's not going to mobilize your base.
100%.
And it's the same as happening in the UK right now. Labour Party in the UK, Keir Starmer, is trying to be like a diet version of the Reform Party. It's silly to me because it's so obvious what the correct answer is. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, why do these people not see what we're all seeing? Why doesn't someone just try a different strategy? And, I'm saying that that's from a politician's point of view. The NGOs, I've been involved with like these NGOs, when I went to go work over there and doing fundraising and stuff like that. But like when you're working with these NGOs, like these aren't people who, like the people that are CEOs and stuff like that of these NGOs, they're not magicians. They're just regular people, but like, they have to work within a structure. Just changing the color of the logo becomes a 3-week deliberation, voting, meetings. What can you get done? You know what I mean? If this is how strenuous just one thing is. Whereas with me, because I'm not affiliated with any of these things, I don't need to sit down and have, conversations about, what color we're going to do this, what logo, which side of the camera do I look on when all of these things. It's just about relaying the truth, relaying the message, and being able to say it. And, subhanAllah, maybe, Allah made me the class clown for 20 years of my life so I can be a public speaker and I can talk, to people in a calm way. And maybe He gave me that experience in Gaza that just simmered the heart and just brought me down. Do you know what I mean? And I've played professional sports. I've competed in jiu-jitsu around the world. in high stakes environments. So I've been in hospitals as they've been bombed and stuff like that. Like there's a lot that I've been through, you know what I mean, mentally. And it's what it's going to take. It's going to take just a steady arm on the ship and just steering it in. And, you know, it's so obvious what we need as a society. We need to calm. And as Muslims, what we need to do is like, you know, you don't need to win right now. You don't need to you know, you don't need someone to say all your key talking points. Let's win over the hearts and minds of people, right? Let's do it with sincerity. Let's do it with care. Let's care about the other people. Let's show our real humanity, you know? Do as the Prophet ﷺ did. Do it as what it should be to be Muslim. Value people, whether it's the other side that are killing you and stuff like that. Show your mercy and show your peace. Because ultimately, if we do that, then Allah's always going to be with you. So, you know what I mean? And look, I'm not a scholar. I'm not I'm a religious person, but I'm not, you know, I've not always been super, you know, religious or anything like that. I'm just a normal Muslim. That's all I am, just a normal Muslim. And I just have tawakkul with Allah and, you know, going about this plan. And inshallah I can get it done. And if I do get it done, you know, like all my life, I've felt like, you know, like I'm not really British and I'm not really Palestinian. And I'm not really like, say, Australian. I'm just like this refugee that's just a nomad walking through the thing. But if I was to build a bridge between those two communities, I'm the bridge. That's what I am. That's what people like me are. Maybe I can be the bridge. Maybe that's where I'm meant to be, is the link between the two worlds. I was never meant to be one or the other. I was meant to be there in the middle, holding them together. Maybe that's what I'm meant to be, and other people like me, other Muslims in the West. Maybe we're meant to be the bridge. We're not meant to be fully British, and we're not meant to be fully Pakistani or Arab. We're meant to be the bridge. But you've got to act like the bridge. You've got to respect both sides. And with the moment that you start doing that, things can happen. When you're genuine and people see that you genuinely care. I genuinely care about the UK. I genuinely care about Australia. I genuinely care about the Middle East and the Muslim world. That's who I am. That's my identity.
It's a very interesting concept. You're right.
Yeah.
As in, it's true. Being in the UK, I never felt British.
Yeah.
When I go to Pakistan, definitely feel home.
Yeah.
But, you know, they would laugh at my Urdu.
Yeah.
And maybe we were supposed to be the bridge. It's interesting. I was speaking with a friend of mine who's a big businessman here. And he's got a lot of like connections here, like in all levels, right? And I'm like, and one of the things that he said, you know, I think if we can connect the Muslim Middle Eastern social media influences with the Western ones, something powerful could happen. Because I don't know what it is, but I just feel like bridging those two worlds, and like just even amongst the Muslims, because even when you look at the Muslim world, they are always looking at the West in awe, and the guys in the West are always like, well, we want to go back home, right? Or you know, that's home and whatever have you. Because he's like, if we could just bridge these two guys,
it's the thing, the bridge.
Something great could happen.
And that's what the hospital is. The hospital is the bridge. It's the bridge between two worlds. You buy in when you fundraise, when you donate to that, when you have Australians going over there, working, building relationships with there. It's a bridge. It's a bridge to the Middle East. It's a bridge to political, you know, dialogue between these countries. It's a bridge between economic. It's a bridge between cultures. We got to get the bridges connected. And, you know, sometimes I've just felt to myself, that's maybe just what I was. I was always meant to be the bridge. You know, and that means that being the bridge is, because you're not one way or the other, neither side's going to really like you very much, you know, because they're always going to feel that you're too English to be them. And the other side are always going to feel you're too Arab to be English or Australian.
But you're doing it for Allah, not for either of them.
I'm doing it for Allah, but it's hard, man. It's hard, the criticism that you get. It's hard, people attacking you. It's hard, you know, the death threats that I've received and all these things, man. Now, and it's hard that, you know, when people don't support you, Muslims, and they attack you, and they're sinister with the way that they go after you. I have to deal with all of that. And, you know, I'm just a human being like anybody else. Like, it's hard to carry this weight. But, you know, I just say to myself, like, alhamdulillah, like, you know, my rewards, inshallah, in the akhirah. Not the dunya.
Dr. Mohammed, wallah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation. We, I love how we ended things with so much so much hope.
Yeah.
You know, the Prophet didn't tolerate from his Sahaba self-defeat.
Yeah.
We can't have that mindset of you know, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
And despite all the tragic things that we've kind of just discussed, the things that you've seen, I love that we're ending it on a mission that is very positive, that's emotional, alarmbatic, and the trajectory just seems like it's going to be good, man.
Inshallah.
And I think this is very empowering.
Yeah.
It's a very empowering point to leave this discussion on.
Inshallah.
I ask Allah to give you utmost help and support.
Just pray Allah keeps my intention pure. That's all I worry about. I want to do this for the sake of Allah. I want my intention to remain pure, and you know, it's something that I always think about every single day, is just making that intention, remaking that intention over and over again, and inshallah, my intention remains pure.
Inshallah. And I would urge those who are listening, you know, they can be in touch with you via social media. If there's any other way to be in touch, we'll put it in the description below this video. But since you're operating on just a two-man team yourself and someone that's helping you, I would urge and implore anyone who feels like they have skills where they could help you, maybe in a social media capacity, maybe in a diplomatic capacity, develop connections with you know, certain entities in certain governments or countries where they can help to give you more leverage to get this hospital made, whether it be in the Middle East or Australia or whatever have you. I'd urge them to just be in touch, because just from my experience having a team, if you can have a team, you could be a lot more efficient. You've been on very little sleep since you've landed in Gaza till now. I ask Allah to, you know, give you tawfiq and keep bringing you success. I mean, the donation link, is it ready?
No, it's not ready yet, because we want, you know, once the Mindaru Foundation are open, because I want all the money to go to a clear source.
Yeah. Shaykh, may Allah give you Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la. With that said, we'll end. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.